Greetings and salutations, folks. My name is Nick, and welcome back to the Outer Worlds, where I would not be surprised if we finish the game today.
Why won't you just die?
Because I'm awesome.
Get me out of here!
That is why I won't just die.
You don't know how glad I am to see you. You did the right thing. Akande was a monster. Her death was much deserved, and long overdue. And you lunatic, you broke into the board's own fortress just to rescue one doddering old man. You are absolutely out of your mind, and I can't begin to thank you enough.
Are you kidding? The board never stood a chance against me. They didn't even shoot at me while I was going through most of their areas.
Ah, all in a day's work for you, huh? You've broken the board's stranglehold on this colony, and you saved my life. But there's still so much we have yet to accomplish. You and I are going to have to work harder than ever to save Halcyon. I'm afraid the situation is far worse than any of us ever anticipated.
Great. And I was just about to pop open some drinks and celebrate.
I would like nothing more than to celebrate this victory, but we have a serious problem on our hands. Earth has gone dark. We haven't received a single message in 3 years.
Oh.
There's been no communication, no signals, nothing. 2 years ago, the Earth's Directorate's frigate disappeared on their way back to Earth. We don't know what they discovered when they arrived, or if they arrived at all.
They haven't exactly been hands-on around here anyway. So there's one less rubber stamp to worry about.
Earth is humanity's home planet, Miss Fenhill. The psychological effects of losing our original home will be devastating.
You mean we're all alone out here? Really alone?
I'm afraid so, Miss Holcomb. Halcyon is the only home we
Huh.
have left. Returning to Earth is no longer an option. We're in serious trouble, my friend. Do you know what this means for Halcyon? We can't rely on Earth for support anymore. We've been cut loose. We're entirely
Well,
on our
we've
own.
got a lot of work ahead of us. We'd best get started.
Yes, we do. You've done a marvelous thing. You've succeeded where anyone else would have failed, including me. We must begin the revival process immediately, starting with the Hope's brightest minds, and then we're going to fix this damn colony, one problem at a time. We're going to need a leader, and I can't imagine a better person for the job than you. What do you say, old friend? Will you help us?
Let's see, I'm gonna do what I've always done, whatever I want, all the time. You can count on me, I'll help you revive the other colonists.
When I revived you, I thought you were going to help me save this colony. I was wrong. I had our roles reversed, you see. You're the one who's going to save us all. I'm just the one who set you on your path. You're the best thing to ever happen to Halcyon. If you want to take it upon yourself to lead this colony, you have my support. We're not a colony any longer, are we? Our last connection...
Yeah,
to
we're our
Earth was
own,
severed, and so
nation,
we've been
state.
set free. Our future is uncertain, and no one knows what tomorrow holds. Exciting, isn't it?
The OSI teaches that everything in the universe happens according to the grand plan. But the stranger that arrived in Halcyon was an unplanned variable. From the moment he landed in Emerald Vale, his actions altered the course of history. The events on Tartarus brought about the end of the board's authority. But the board's mistakes would haunt the colony for decades to come. The damage they left behind would require the work of a generation to repair. Dr. Phineas Wells began reviving a handful of the Hope's colonists. engineers, scientists, technicians, and intellectuals. They were among the brightest minds the Earth had ever sent out into the stars. The Hope scientists and engineers woke up in a colony descending headlong into total collapse. With no way to return to Earth, they had no choice but to band together and devote themselves to the cause of saving Halcyon. The people of Halcyon were nothing if not hardy. In the absence of the board's authority, many of the colony's settlements banded together with a single purpose in mind: survival. Life was especially hard in the years to come. Some towns dissolved by attrition and starvation, but most of them found a way to carry on. In the years to come, Halcyon was forced to reckon with its newfound freedom. The board was gone, and for better or worse, the colony was responsible for its own destiny. Between MSI's worker-centric policies and the iconoclast's manpower, Sanjar and Zora were able to rally many of the Terra 2 townships to their cause. MSI's workforce swelled, and the iconoclasts enjoyed a significant surge in their ranks. The board was too distracted by infighting and internal politics to stop MSI from becoming a powerful corporation and a refuge for townships that might have fallen through the cracks. Consumed by paranoia, Lilia Hagen took Sublight Salvage in a controversial direction, openly accusing board officials of an extraterrestrial conspiracy. One day, an accident at the Groundbreaker's docking bay silenced her forever. Time would tell if her replacement could keep the Sublight family together. Adelaide McDevitt replaced Reed Thompson as the leader of Edgewater. She and her followers transformed Edgewater in their image. Anyone loyal to Reed was pressured into leaving town, and those who stayed behind adapted to her way of life. Adelaide transformed the old cannery into a new garden. The nearby Edgewater Cemetery provided a convenient source of fertilizer. Under the leadership of Junlei Tennyson, the Groundbreaker held firm against corporate influence. The ship's mechanical stability gave Junlei the time to educate a promising generation of engineers schooled in her family's traditions.
But are Junlei and Parvati still dating?
Promising. The rediscovery of the Hope and the abandonment of the lifetime employment program forced Byzantium to come to terms with some uncomfortable realities about the state of Halcyon. While Byzantines were reluctant to surrender the luxuries they'd grown accustomed to, the board's diminished authority gave them little choice in the matter. Nearly everyone had to learn to make do with less. Some even had to get jobs. It was a dark time indeed. Even the Gorgon asteroid, though a distant enigma to most of Halcyon, felt the aftershocks of your actions. The destroyed Adrenatime synthesizer became a symbol of the board's cruelty and a rallying point for Wells and his scientists as they sought to build a more humane, ethical Halcyon. They cleared the dead from Gorgon's laboratories and repurposed them to aid in the crucial work of solving the colony's nutrition crisis. Gorgon, which had once sown death and destruction across Halcyon, became a source of hope and renewal. The Gorgon Project's final explosive end was bittersweet for Olivia Ambrose. She wandered the colony's fringes alone, searching for others like her who despised the board and meant to destroy them. In time, she found Phineas Wells and his cadre of scientists, and she joined them in their efforts to save Halcyon. For a while, she even knew an uneasy peace. But for all that, Olivia found purpose in Wells' project. She was always haunted by the memory of her daughter, Minnie, who hadn't lived to see the better world they were building. She never did forgive herself for the horror her work had wrought on Halcyon, but she remembered fondly the daring captain who'd put an end to it at last. In spite of everything, the Gorgon asteroid remained a sobering reminder of the potential for progress.
The Peril and Gorgon is getting quite the
in
epilogue.
humanity's most ambitious efforts. The Rizzo's company in Halcyon dissolved after the collapse of the board. Needless to say, the launch of Spectrum Brown was indefinitely delayed. A stockpile of Spectrum Brown remains buried deep beneath the ruins of the old distillery, abandoned to time and attrition. With the dissolution of the board, Ruth Bellamy found herself without the two constants in her life: Byzantine culture and her sister Belinda. In the face of this new reality, she struggled to find a direction for her life. The colony had moved on from Halcyon Helen and would require new heroes in the years to come. And so Ruth Bellamy decided it was time to exit stage left. She quietly disappeared from public view. The dissolution of the board did not mean the dissolution of the ambitions of Cedric Kincannon, the charismatic leader of Sublight Underground. Cedric offered Slug's transportation services to the newly thawed colonists and set to work ferrying resources and food wherever they were most needed. For better or worse, Slug headgear became fashionable in the following years. As the board began to disintegrate, Spencer Woolrich found himself at a crossroads. Cling to what little stardom remained to him, or help usher Halcyon into its new future. To the surprise of many, perhaps himself most of all, Spencer chose the latter option. Having learned a variety of different skills in the many different roles played throughout his lengthy career, Spencer founded a radio serial dedicated to staying alive despite the odds. His subjects included how to survive violent encounters with only grazing wounds, dispense pithy one-liners for tense scenarios, and, of course, how to look good doing both. After a brief attempt at dating Helen as one person rather than two, which both Bertie and Helen found too strange, Bertie struck out on his own to try his hand at raising woolly cows. Many of his former Rangers teammates soon followed, accompanied by the woolly cow the team had originally plied with alcohol. The dairy farm thrived under Bertie's leadership and care. The Dairy Rangers privately believed that the woolly cows softened Bertie's temper considerably, although the only one brave enough to say this to his face was promptly headbutted. Due to the board's dissolution, many of the Prophet's old customers no longer found quite the same value in productivity seminars that they once had. With her business drying up, the Prophet chose to take her followers down a new path. Months later, salvagers on Eridanos found clues leading them to a seemingly abandoned bunker out in the wilderness. Inside, they discovered horribly mangled corpses, sacrificed to a blood-scrawled portrait of a sprat-headed deity. The Prophet was not among the bodies. Your influence shifted Ellie's perspective. She finally admitted, albeit grudgingly, that she just might need other people. Sometimes. With a steady income from the life insurance payouts, she was finally able to afford a ship of her own. She hired a small crew and flew supply missions to communities on the fringe. Some of them were even legal. Life in Halcyon was sobering for Felix Millstone. The grand revolution he dreamed of never came. There was no great awakening for the colony, no celebrations in the streets. There was only the hard, desperate work of trying to repair a broken colony. Felix never had a head for numbers, but if there was labor to be done, he was there to help. Eventually, Felix realized that the work of a revolution was done with two hands. As much as he enjoyed his adventures aboard the Unreliable, the vicar known as Max eventually decided that it was time to move on, to live out the life he had sought so long to create. He knew there were many in the colony who carried burdens much worse than the ones he had struggled with, and he devoted himself to easing their suffering wherever he could. He only ever took up arms again to defend the defenseless. Unshackled from a lifetime of striving and fighting the universe and himself, Vicar Maximilian de Soto was finally at peace. Once the matter with the Hope colonists was resolved, Junlei bashfully asked Parvati if she'd like to join her permanently on the Groundbreaker, and Parvati enthusiastically, if somewhat awkwardly, agreed. The stories of her adventures spread across the colony, and Parvati soon found herself the center of attention. Having served as the engineer of a renowned spacecraft, tramp freighters and wildcat miners sought her out by name, and in no time, she was a fixture in the Groundbreaker's mechanical ecosystem. She and Junlei were never far apart. Nyoka returned to Monarch to take another crack at making a permanent life for herself. She formed the Charon Group, a mercenary outfit of ragtag survivalists and wilderness experts. Anyone in need of a guide, or just looking to throw back a beer and swap stories, could find her camping on the trail or clearing an infestation. The SAM unit that accompanied you spread awareness of the product line's superior sanitation and maintenance capabilities across what was left of the colony. This led to a boost in SAM unit sales. Did you know that SAM units are the longest-lasting, toughest-acting cleaning solution in Halcyon? Minister Clark was released from house arrest, and his contact with you gave him a sense of renewed purpose and vigor. Once it became clear that no help would be coming from Earth, he threw his considerable efforts and talents into helping Halcyon manage the crisis before it. Chairman Rockwell served as the public face for the changes in Halcyon to come. Whenever you needed strings pulled or a voice to sell a policy change, Rockwell was only too happy to oblige. As for Dr. Phineas Wells, he spent his remaining years in his orbital lab. He eventually came to terms with his own past and was able to forgive the mistakes of his younger self by devoting his remaining years to serving the colony. Dr. Wells was able to revive many more scientists and engineers than he first expected, thanks to the additional batch of chemicals you stole from the Ministry. Wells never forgot about the human lives that were lost in acquiring these chemicals. In the end, Dr. Wells was able to save every scientist and engineer aboard the Hope. Over the next decade, nearly all of the Hope's remaining colonists were successfully revived. Halcyon saw a period of rapid technological and scientific advancement. Breakthroughs in dietary supplements saved the colony from starvation. Geoengineering projects and social reforms began to change the structure and character of the colony. Dr. Wells laid the groundwork for the project to save the colony, but he would never live to see the fruits of his labor. He passed away a few years later. His work was carried on by the scientists and engineers he revived. Today, Halcyon has stabilized. The people of the colony work hard to adapt to their new circumstances. Nearby colonies send aid and supplies. Life will never be easy in Halcyon, but for the first time in its history, there exists a sense of real, genuine hope about the future. And what about you, the unplanned variable in the history of Halcyon? Long after Wells passed away, you carried on his work with more energy, determination, and brilliance than he could ever muster. The years that followed were hard, but Halcyon survived by the efforts of the Hope's most promising colonists, the greatest of which was you. No one knows what's happened to Earth, and no one knows what the future has in store for Halcyon. All we know for certain is this: the name of the Unreliable and that of its intrepid captain will remain the subject of countless stories for years to come.
Holy crap, that was a... a very overarching epilogue. I was not like everybody and their dog got an epilogue in this thing. Wow. I was not expecting the ending to be so utterly complete, to be so resolving. For some reason, I was expecting the ending to be more of like a... So, in the video game Rage from id Software, it has kind of the same plot, in which you discover that there have been people that have been frozen and have been hibernating since this comet struck. So the comet striking is not the same, but the hibernating and freezing thing is. And you find yourself with the ability to unfreeze them. And the game ends you with you unfreezing those people who were put in hibernation. And the game just ends. You're left kind of wondering, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for the story? And I was expecting the game to just kind of stop there as well, here, for the Outer Worlds. But with all of these epilogues, like, the game has basically set up itself to be like, hey, you saved the day. You did the thing. Your work is done. Good job. Now, there's a whole thing in regards to Earth. That's an interesting story thread to find out at the end. And I believe they are working on an Outer Worlds 2. So I wonder if that is essentially going to be... where that storyline goes. Especially considering just how complete this story ends. But okay, there we go. We are done with the Outer Worlds. The game, the DLC. I thought it was great. It's basically Fallout in space. Runs better than Bethesda's Fallout games. Genuinely better written. Very entertaining. I loved it. Fantastic. If I had any complaints, the complaints I might say is that the shooting eventually becomes more mechanical than anything. As you become much more powerful in the game, the actual act of fighting bad guys becomes more of a pushover. More of a pushover. I mean, less of a pushover. By the time I fought the what's it called? The Parasite Queen on Murder on Eridanos, I basically just unloaded 2 clips of ammunition from my light machine gun, and it was dead. And that was it. I don't know if Sophia was supposed to take more damage, but she also did not last longer than a few bullets. But that's the thing. That's what also makes this game very interesting, is that there's always multiple solutions to any given problem. The fact that, I didn't necessarily have to spend much time fighting that robot at the end. If there's anything to learn from Deus Ex Human Revolution, is that boss fights in a game that emphasizes multiple strategies shouldn't force you into combat. It's just the Outer Worlds has that benefit in that you can actually spec for both combat and stealth, combat and dialogue. Now, I suppose if I spec'd all the way into tech and stealth, then my combat might not have caught up, but that's why you have those alternate paths in order to succeed. But the combat is not necessarily the main focus here, even though it is a heavier focus. The story is fantastic. Dialogue is great. It is genuinely funny game. It is a genuinely frightening game in regards to the horrible things that happen. I was not expecting to in Peril and Gorgon to find the company has decided to like there's the scene in Peril and Gorgon where somebody decided to like, oh, we're gonna take the bodies of these test subjects we got and we're gonna just pound them into cubes. And I'm just looking at the cubes and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. And that's the thing, like the idea of corporations without limitation. Like, you look at something like BioShock. Like, I feel as though this is almost like the intention of Rapture, but pumped up. Like, you look at a BioShock, and the idea is that Rapture exists as a place where the scientist is not held back by any limitations, and corporations are not held by limitations. It is by the sweat of your own brow that you're able to do what you want. And none of these scientists created a dietary toothpaste that used like animal. I suppose they created. They found the atom, and that became its own problem. And the addition of superpowers has definitely allowed a lot of the like BioShock's Rapture to fall apart. But like there's so many tales in this game of individual separate corporations infighting and just horribly falling apart in their attempt to increase productivity. That narrative through line throughout the game. The idea that corporations and their desire to focus on that bottom line, forcing the worker to do whatever they want as a means to an end, holds everything together. Wherever they take the Outer Worlds to next, I will definitely be on board to see. Do you have any suggestions for something to play next? Leave them down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have yourselves a good night.